Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this conversation for our San Francisco Indie Fest. I'm Celeste Wong, super excited to be here in conversation today with some wonderful filmmakers from More Beautiful Perversions. We have writer, director, and producer Pavli Serenetsky and producer and costumes facilitator Yuro Hu. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Um, this film just immediately won me over. It has so much charm. Um, and it really surprised me when I first watched it. Can you, probably just start us off and tell us about what inspired you to make this film and tell the story?
Well, there's it's the film I feel like came out of starting to get really excited about the beauty and the rot of compost. And it was interesting because as Gero knows, the film took a lot of variations, and so I was watching a big question at the time was also how can I continue making movies when I also am doing really want to only be helpful for the earth and like really make sure that I'm a really good earth citizen, and how can movies that are fun be helpful for the earth, and like what is the point of view from a tree of a movie, and like so Euro has been present had been present for all of those conversations too, and for compost and all these characters that had been living in my mind and on the page for many years, and compost really became the way that we watch these characters transform into a more beautiful perversion of themselves and kind of a film too. And so, the film sort of started out called Minor Perversions, and it was a lot scarier and like maybe more surreal and like it was wonderful, but I really started asking those questions as I was getting more into doing land stewardship roles, and I was like, that's not a movie that feels like the point of view of a tree. Like trees find us all of us humans to be kind of perversions of the planet in both beautiful and also really gross ways. And so how can we make a film that holds that beautiful perspective that the tree could hold, but also is like holding this human perspective of sloppiness and mistakes. So that's kind of like the inspirations became. They started and then they became and then they became, and of course all the collaborators were also a really big part of like asking yourself what is the need for this person beyond just the film, and this place. And so really trying to write that into the script and have a film that's not just about making a piece of art that I'm excited about, but what's actually helpful for each person for each place.
Yeah, that's incredibly creative and cool. I've never heard an answer to that question quite like that, but it really comes through in the film. Um, and Euro, I'd love to know, like, at what stage you came in. Like, what was it about this project that made you interested? Had you worked with Pavlu before? Yeah, what brought you?
Yeah. I actually was there from, I'd say, like the very beginning almost. And Pavli and I met through filmmaking. So Pavli helped me with my first short film during COVID, and they actually helped me do casting and was a producer in that. And already during that time, they had started the seeds of what would become More Beautiful Perversions. And we were just talking about it a lot. I think we had similar experiences growing up with like overcoming nihilism, and we kind of joked about both being recovering nihilists, and that was a big foundation for the work. And just from the get-go, like I just knew that we were really aligned in like how we want to exist as artists and as like citizens of Earth. So it's just been really beautiful getting to deepen that bond and also grow with the project because I think the time it took to create the project was also really generative in kind of like growing up a little bit and our perspectives of like how we want to be like adults in the world. So yeah, I was there since the very beginning. We've talked through so many versions of this. We've talked and we also brought in a lot of like friends and collaborators. So it's always been kind of a community experiment from the very beginning.
And I actually wrote the lead for Euro way back when. Like, but
Yeah.
then we were like, well, actually, Euro should be a producer.
It's honestly so funny because I had a dream about More Beautiful Perversions last night where
You did?
we were doing a reading and we were in like a field and you're like, you have to read this, but you have to read this lying on your back. Yeah, that was the whole
Maybe we should
dream.
do the interview all laying on their backs. That'd be really hard with the computers, though.
Yeah, it would just be like the empty room.
Yeah. I know.
Um, yeah, both of you mentioned this the very like collaborative spirit of the film and of this filmmaking, which I think also comes through just in the vibe of the film as a viewer. But can you tell us more about what that was like, what that sort of structure was like in terms of the crew and I guess the actors as well, sort of like what that collaborative working style is like for you?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I would say the one of the biggest parts of the collaboration was in the locations department and also in like co-directing. And they were both sort of experiments of our collective, Purpose Repair Shop of which is a mutual aid collective. And so this term gets thrown around, right? Mutual aid or solidarity economy. And it's the questions are often like, what does that actually look like in practice? Well, we were trying to create a model that is the practice, right? And so locations department, like how can we uh collaborate with the places and the stewards of those places and what are their needs as a community place and then what are our needs as a kind of imaginary narrative place and community within our film crew. And so that was a really main part of our collaborations in the film. And then another part that was sort of a bigger experiment, I would say, because that just seems like sort of more of a documentary approach anyway, or at least like it seems like that's the way that coming from um, land stewardship, that's sort of what you have to do when you go into a place. But the bigger experiment was the co-directing experiment, where it was like I asked every collaborator to co-direct a scene if they wanted to. So anyone who wanted to is interested in that could take me up on it, and then they could choose whatever scene they felt most they resonated most with. And then we would also have that be a co-prioritizing, like, is that possible for that scene for them? Talk to the DP, talk to all the other collaborators, like, how do we actually co-direct that scene for their vision, but also the macro vision. So that was really interesting and it was really fun. And some of those co-directing experiments just went so harmoniously and were like, with Euro, it was like when we co-directed the compost scene, we just were so much in the exact same world, probably because Euro had been there from the beginning and like really knows these characters in an even deeper, perspective on their own. And then there was collaborators like the production assistant who's only there for one day and who was wonderful and was also like we were stretched for time and we had to do that scene in like I think it was half an hour and she was amazing too, but like that was just such a different collaboration. It was way more like not really talking about the characters, really more lighting focused, more time focused, more how do we get everyone to still be having fun even though this is kind of rushed and intense. And so every co-directing collaboration was totally itself of who the beings of the collaboration is, which of course is the nature of co-liberating anyway. But yeah, so yeah, I mean, you could probably speak more into that too. But yeah.
Yeah, I just think it's also funny to note that the whole co-directing thing came up pretty late in the game. So it was something where when we first heard about it, when we probably first brought it up, we were like, I don't know if this is gonna work. Like, are you sure you want to do this? This is like opening such a can of worms. But I think it just goes to show that like there's so much trust and willingness to be open with this project, and probably really led that. And yeah, it ended up being like I'd say really, really successful and fun for everyone. And I think it really added to kind of I mean, we're all humans directing it, but it made it feel like less located in one kind of like authorship position in the traditional sense. And then with the conversations that surrounded like locations in the pre-production stages, those were like so important to feeling comfortable and kind of like mutually nourishing with each of the places that we pick because they were all really important in terms of like what we were offering them and what they were able to offer us. So that was another place where I just felt like that set the tone for this movie and is like such an important part of it.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say also because I so there were some co-directors that weren't humans, but it's interesting because even on the call sheet I was kind of intense with our other producer about being like put the old growth tree, like put this, hemlock tree on as the co-director for today or put the Brooklyn Bridge. And I know that, I'm not a moron. Like I know people think that's really silly and stuff because some people don't see these beings as being their directors. But to me, I really feel like acknowledging, and that was what, Euro was just talking about, really acknowledging the place and as it's inevitably one of the directors, if not, it's the director because the weather, because they could just last minute decide they don't want to let you film there. Like they're really director, but sometimes the team, the rest of the community doesn't really know that. And I just find that it helps everyone see that they're part of something a little bigger when when we're all together. And it's not really we think we're making this thing, but also there's these huge factors that are going to be uh really the yeah, they're really going to be telling us what needs to happen and then we have to pivot accordingly, and I feel like that's just a good way to be in the world in general because get a little bit less self-consumed with your own plan.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's really cool and really inspiring to hear about because it is unconventional, but we know that conventional methods aren't necessarily like leading us to a very fruitful, exciting place in the industry right now. So hearing about these really creative, really collaborative, community-based methods of filmmaking and all of the work with Purpose Repair Shop is really inspiring for me to hear about. And I hope that more people like take on that model because it's inspiring and the results kind of speak for themselves. You created a really beautiful film. So thank you for sharing so much about that process because I do think it'll be really interesting for a lot of people to hear about. And one thing that kind of came through, I feel like in both of your answers and in how you're talking about this, it's really those themes of stewardship and our relationship with the earth and the environment definitely come through. And also, there's like a palpable sort of sense of humor that I really enjoy in the film. I think the character of Aiko, the way that they recount their story, there's just a lot of humor built into. I guess like a lot of the dialogue and just sort of the perspective. Can you talk about like incorporating that aspect? Did that come through with the actors more, or was that always sort of part of the vibe of it?
Yeah, I mean, maybe you might even have a macro perspective on that because I guess it's just the way I sort of see the world. But I feel like as Euro said at the beginning, we both Euro coined that kind of phrase, like being like, we're both reformed nihilists. And I think when Euro said that, it kind of like clicked, like, what does that really mean to be a reformed nihilist? Because it's kind of like being a nihilist is really intense, but not in the way that we were, and not really in the way that Aiko is. Like it's sort of an innocent, but it's an it's kind of like an annoying teenage vibe or something. And so Yeah, I don't know. A lot of the sense of humor, I will say, for this script for More Beautiful Perversions did come from the ideas of like what would people find whenever I'm leading groups for I lead like different restoration sites. Whenever I lead groups, sometimes they get bored, they don't care about the plant, they think something's gross, they think like why do we have to be here walking through the dirt, this is, and so it you can get really frustrated by that when it's what you care about, or you can find it really funny and silly, because it is ultimately like someone just being like ew, or like this is it's just, and so I think a lot of that came from just trying to have how yeah, just trying to have fun with the questions of someone being feeling like very separate from the land, and how kind of yeah, kind of silly it ends up looking because it's so clearly beautiful and, and connective and stuff. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, if you might have an understanding of how that came together more too. But
I think it is a little inherent in both of our natures. I think for me, it's like humor is kind of one of the only ways we can survive like the heartbreak of being alive. And it makes things bearable, and like being able to hold both like the tragic and the beautiful and the serious and the hilarious parts of living, I think is just like what the human experience is. I think Sahara brought a particularly funny side to Aiko,
for
which like
sure.
if I had ended up if I had ended up actually acting, I feel like it
Yeah.
would be so much different, so much more like angsty deadpan. But I really love like how the embodiment of Aiko kind of shown through. And I think it is something about being in youth where you maybe have a lot of feelings and a lot of angst about things, but you don't really know where that comes from. It's not as experiential. And I think like as you get older, you like in order to deal with the suffering, you also kind of embrace humor more and more. So yeah, I love the balance of both. I think it's really um how we survive these times.
Yeah, absolutely agree. It's something I really resonated with in the film. So really beautifully
I'm
done.
glad.
Okay, one last question. I really want to ask you about the look of the film. It's so beautiful, beautifully shot on film and processed in a really unique way. Can you go into crafting the look of the film and what went into that?
Yeah. So it's shot on 16 millimeter, which I always wanted to shoot on film, partially because of the transformative nature of film. Like, just it being a process, kind of what I talked about compost, all these characters in the film are going through these experiences that create hopefully a more beautiful perversion of themselves, or and so film does that too, right? Like it's an actual process of uh of these different these different these different materials coming together to expose the silver halides that previously like weren't, and so light really helps that process. Um and I also knew shooting on film that there's this question of like, but how do we do it also in a way that would be respectful to the land too, and so really wanted to find a way to eco process, and I didn't really have that practice in my toolbox yet. And so this film was a really huge pillar of it, was like how can we make sure at least some of the film is eco process. And when I say eco process, now I know, because it's like my big practice that I'm always doing, which all the black and white portions are eco process, which basically means that instead of having like a developer that's a chemical and having chemicals that are the fixer and the developer, it's in the dark room you're having like a kind of a plant soup that I'll take from the yard, take some rosemary, or for the film tried to use the plants that are in the film like hemlock and some comfrey and stuff like that, and basically mix it with sodium carbonate, which is washing soda, and ascorbic acid, which is vitamin C. So these are pretty, they're not toxic. You can just they're fine for the, if you put them back into the soil, they're not gonna make anything die, and it might take a little bit longer for them to grow back. But yeah, and then salt water for the fixer. And so those black and white portions I hand process with the plants, with the collaboration with the plants. And for the rest of the film, Bethany, as our lead like director of photography, Bethany has been a collaborator for a while too. And just that Bethany just like has this beautiful way of getting very intimate with what she's looking at, and her gaze, I just feel like just was like an obvious gaze of like love and humor. Like Bethany's really funny, and the color, and just so I knew that we could lean on Bethany and trust her, and she's such a like, let's just go for it. And so that was really wonderful, and we really had a really stripped down camera team, so it was really just like Bethany made it happen. There was only like two people, it was Bethany and basically Gabby, like one for safety. And we had a bunch of locations because we wanted to be helpful for all these different forests. So it was really like everyone was a trooper, we were on the road, and so Bethany was able to get all the color shots, and then the rest of the crew we would shoot on the Bolex on a little camera, and then all of the black and white stuff is what like I eco process from the whole group of us filming. And so we tried to have it also be like partially collaborative in that way for the images. But yeah, we didn't have a gaffer, which was a huge thing. Like we had a gaffer only for like 3 days, and so Bethany was like our gaffer too for 16 millimeters, hard to gaff. Like if some nerds about cinematography nerds know that like you need a lot of light for 16. And we had a couple of night scenes. And so those are like that where I'm just like mystery to me a little bit. Bethany really made it happen. Because yeah, the daytime plant stuff, like I could shoot all day at Eco Process, but Bethany really made those technically challenging ones happen. So yeah. And we always knew we wanted it like lush, and yeah, the 16 is just like an old growth picture.
That's incredibly fascinating, and just so beautiful to see. I feel like we could talk forever. There's so much more to talk about this film. I'm really sorry we're running out of time, but hopefully folks at home or folks who saw the film can kind of keep up with your work and the work of the collective. Is there any way for them to kind of keep up with that?
Yeah, we have websites like well, also the film will be, yeah, I mean, my website's just my name, pavlysarnetsky.com. I put stuff up there and things, and I guess some social media, although I try not to be on those evil platforms. But and then the film is gonna be in the spring. It will be released like on little hard drives that are going to be through video storage, and so there'll be some bonus like manifestos of the collective and all sorts of extras type of things there. So that will be cool. And Purpose Repair Shop has a website too. You can get that from my website or Purpose Repair shop.info. And your website is your name too, right?
Yeah, it's zero.info, but it is, it hasn't been updated in a long time.
And Euro has
But
a
yeah.
movie that they're working on too that I'm helping with too.
Who knows when that's going to be out? But yes, it's in the works.
That's awesome. Well, I'm definitely excited to see more from you, both and the collective. So thank you so much for making this film, for sharing it with our audience, and thank you all at home for watching.
Thanks, Celeste.
Thank you.